Now, police watchdog IPID has dispatched 4 investigating officers to the scene after one person died during the student protest. The Investigative Directorate says it will probe the crime scene in Braamfontein and also talk to eyewitnesses. Now, for more on this, I'm joined by Eldred De Klerk, who is a policing expert. Mr. De Klerk, thank you very much for your time today. You know, I spoke a bit earlier on.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So I spoke a bit earlier on to Thami Ngubeni of Gauteng Policing. And the first question I asked him is, when police are briefed to go into volatile situations like this, what type of brief do they get? And I asked this in the backdrop of the 36-year-old man who was shot and killed by police. The reports that are coming in from the doctor who treated him is that he sustained 3 bullet wounds.
Thami, thank you very much, and I'll be interested to know what they actually said. Let's just correct something. A situation could be deemed to be potentially, or there could be a high probability of violence. Nobody can predict that there will be violence. Police have a tendency to plan for worst-case scenarios. However, their assumptions and their planning should stand the test of scrutiny. So part of that is regulated by the Regulated of Gatherings Act that actually says what a successful police public order operation would be. Decreasing injuries, minimizing or avoiding deaths and confrontation, and ensuring that there's no violence. All of these are clear indicators of a successful police operation. So there should have been a briefing, planning, the releasing of the appropriate amount of resources, both human, technical, and support resources. And what clearly is part of that brief and the planning is the use of force. What level of force will be operated, and at what stage would that level of force be adjusted or changed? There should be no, and there's very few circumstances where police adopt the highest level of the use of force from the outset, unless they are confronted by a particularly volatile situation where there's a direct threat to the lives of others or to their own lives. And even then, they should use only such force as to de-escalate or arrest that particular situation and then stop the use of force. And that's in line with all the provisions of the Criminal Procedure Act, of issues around self-defense, and around the Police Act and the regulations of Gathering Act.
And what type of ammunition should actually be used in situations like this?
Well, the police's own prescripts calls for a less than lethal force. Now we know, and we've known for a while, that a rubber bullet from up close is potentially lethal. Today, by all accounts, it proved to be lethal. There should be no circumstance where a police officer shoots a rubber bullet that close, from all accounts, within 3 to 5 feet, even 12 feet from somebody, and directly at the person. That shot is potentially lethal. And that is what IPID will establish. The reason for the shoot, the motive for it, how threatened the officer felt. And in this case, I must say that our condolences to the family of the deceased. And our thoughts is also with the individual officer who, as part of his or her briefing, should have been told when to use force, what level of force, and as I said earlier, and all force in the police in a public order situation is used under command. So what did the commander say to that officer about the use of force, and when force will be tolerated, and what kind of response? So even if the person was wordy, shouting at you, dancing in front of you, provided there's no direct threat to life, there should have been no shots fired.
There seems, Mr. De Klerk, to be no sort of accountability. You know, and I spoke to Thami Ngubeni. He at the time was saying that he didn't even know about the fact that somebody had been killed allegedly by police, even though there were eyewitnesses who had actually seen this hand in hand. What would be then the next way forward?
Well, it's what happens on the scene. As I said earlier, any change in the instruction and the tolerance of the use of force comes with what we call control factors. So every South African and every citizen has the right to peaceful protest. Remember, we don't have to ask permission for this. If we go take to the streets and there's a reasonable level of peaceful protest, the police should set out to facilitate that. They are in direct control through their command with the provincial coordination, for the provincial JOC, the Joint Operations Center. If there is any incident or any change in the mood of the crowd, they suddenly become violent, they start pelting police with Molotov cocktails and the like, that is a control factor. It's communicated to the provincial command, and only on instruction back from the provincial command do the police either engage or withdraw. At that point, they probably would have been withdraw because the commander on the ground makes that determination. So there shouldn't have been a situation where somebody in senior command who's part of the provincial command structure is not aware at any 1 minute of time what is actually happening on the ground, because those factors determine the next step in police engagement with the crowd, including cordoning off the area, diverting traffic, and taking a safe distance from the protesting students, even if they are burning tires in the road, unless whatever damage or violent action they're taking has a direct consequence for destroying a property from which there could be, for example, they're blowing up a power station, or they potentially blowing up a petrol station, and there'll be a direct threat to life.
So you are really saying, Mr. De Klerk, you really are saying, Mr. De Klerk, that the situation needs to be extreme and it needs to be dire for a diversion and perhaps for more intense action by the police.
Exactly, and it's a two-way conversation at all times a three-way conversation between the police and the crowd, and the police and their command making a situational assessment of what needs to happen, and appropriate action needs to be taken.
Mr. De Klerk, we'll leave it at that for now. Thank you so much for your time. That's Mr. Eldred De Klerk, their policing expert.